on the road, in the gym, at a coffee house. No matter where you listen, this is Prevention Perk. I'm Steve Miller with Mid-America PTTC. It's time to perk up our prevention efforts. My guest today is Trish Luna, speaker, trainer, and author of Lambi Learns About Addiction, a book about prevention. Lambi is a beautifully engaging story which provides trauma-informed, evidence-based, age-appropriate tools for children and caregivers to utilize to combat ACEs, adverse childhood experiences, which are determinants for negative life outcomes. I met Trish and her companion Lambi at the 17th Annual National Alliance for Drug Endangered Children Conference and quickly realized her message is not just for children, but for the child in all of us. Hello, Trish, and welcome to Prevention Perk.
Thank you. I'm glad to be here with you.
How did you get interested in prevention and a book about prevention?
Well, this has been my family's story for over 35 years, and I saw the multi-generational impact of addiction play out within my own family. And I knew that there needed to be a conversation about substance use disorder within a family system, especially for young children. But then if we don't have a piece on prevention, A, we're not helping that next generation, and B, the message is limited with who we can share it with, unless we're talking about prevention, because that's sort of widely recognized as something important to talk with kids about.
Yeah, I think going further upstream is sometimes the hardest sell in the prevention work because we're so accustomed culturally to maybe addressing the issue or the problem. But when we're talking about prevention, we're really trying to get ahead of that. And you and I were talking offline before we got here that this multi-generational facet of addiction really has to be upended by that dialogue about prevention.
Correct. And I feel like there's more recognition and awareness now of how important that is. We have the DARE program, and of course, Nancy Reagan, which I have a funny story about that. When my son was in kindergarten and he came running out, and his father had been struggling since I was pregnant with him with substance use disorder. And Nick came running out to the car and said, Mommy, I know how to help Daddy. He can fix this. I'm going to give him this ribbon and he can just say no. And I just thought, oh, Nancy Reagan, you know what? Like, I just thought it was heartbreaking to see this child think that that was the answer. And it was, I mean, I understand it's good to say something, but that was not helpful to me, to him, or to his father. And he was not able to say no because of the ribbon. So it's having an effective piece of prevention. And what does that mean? And going younger and younger with kids to have a honest, truthful conversation that this isn't just a case of, you know, I could have said to you, well, Steve, just say no. That isn't a helpful preventive tool.
You're listening to Prevention Perk. The funder of this project, along with all the other products of the Mid-America PTTC, is the Substance Abuse and Mental Health Services Administration. Although funded by SAMHSA, the content of this recording does not necessarily reflect the views of SAMHSA. ACEs, adverse childhood experiences, are strongly associated with a wide range of health problems that can persist throughout a person's lifespan. To learn more about adverse childhood experiences and the role of substance misuse prevention, download a resource guide from the Strategic Prevention Technical Assistance Center, SPTAC. A link is in the show notes. You've written this book. It's Lambi Learns About Addiction, a book about prevention. So you're really moving upstream in this dialogue. And I've met Lambi. Actually, I have one. The listeners can't see it, but I'm cuddling it right now. Tell us about Lambi and talk about the book. Like, what is this all about?
So it originated with my need for something to talk to my children about substance use disorder as it was impacting our lives. So my children were very young. Their father was suffering from this disease. I knew nothing about it. I was flying in the dark completely, but I knew I needed to say something to my children, give them some language, because I mean, I think we both know growing up, it was always, if your parent, alcohol was more prevalent than drugs per se in my family. And it would just say, oh, well, daddy's not feeling well, or daddy's a little sick, and I just knew that that was not true when I was a kid, if that's what you were told, or, oh, this one's not feeling well. No, when you're not feeling well, like I have the bucket next to my bed and my mom has a cool rag on my head. So I just thought teaching children to not trust their instinct of knowing something's not right, like this is not okay, wasn't okay to tell a lie like that. But I didn't know what words to use. I didn't know how would you say that. Joe at the time was using crack cocaine. So I wasn't going to say, well, your dad's a crack addict. I mean, that's not how you're going to talk to your 2, 3, 4-year-old. So I tried to find resources, and this is obviously before the Google machine. But so I went to the library, I spoke to my pediatrician, I spoke to my pastor, and, anytime I would ask for help, I was just more stigmatized and shamed and looked at very differently. It was not a welcoming or helpful engagement as I was trying to find help. And come to find out, there were no books for children on this subject. No one was touching this. So I wrote a book called My Daddy Has a Problem. And that's what I would say to the kids. Your daddy has a problem. It's on the inside. And I did it in rhyme. And then I tried to send it off to publishers. And so this is in 1991. And all you could do is just send the words to the black hole of publishing. And everybody just came back with saying, oh, yeah, no, absolutely not. Nobody is going to touch this subject, especially with young children. So again, this just compounds this sense of, oh no, you're bad people. This is a terrible subject and you're horrible. And, we're just not going to talk about it. And of course, not talking about it doesn't make it go away. But fast forward, what are you going to do? That's when publishing houses held the keys to the public discourse. They decided what was okay to talk about, just like musicians. I mean, you had to be hired by a big label, right? I mean, that's how you made it. Now you can put your song up on Spotify. So the world is different. Fast forward, and I started seeing my daughter struggling with this same disease, and I saw it impacting my young granddaughters. And now there is the Google machine, and lo and behold, there's still no books written directly to young children where they can be seen in a story. And my frustration grew when, you think there's books about pooping, the book called Everybody Poops, but we're not going to talk about this. And I understand it's not applicable in every household, right? I mean, it's not necessary or needed, but the households where it's needed, it's desperately needed. And then as I went further in this journey of just bringing all the different things in my life experience to bear, I was able to, now there's the world of self-publishing, and it was getting the word out to organizations that this was something that was available. But there needed to be this prevention piece, Steve, to make it hold more meaning and have a deeper impact. Besides which, it is wonderful to have people say, thank you for giving me something to talk to my children about this with. Or children saying, Lambi knows exactly how I feel. To be seen and understood, I think we all crave that as humans.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. I'm curious now. I've already alluded to the fact that Lambi looks like a bunny. Why did you settle on I'm just curious. Why did you settle on a bunny? Why not a giraffe or, an elephant? Why is there significance? Was it just your choice? How did you depict Lambi this way?
Yeah. So it's interesting that, you shared earlier when we were talking offline that you'll have things come in the middle of the night that you just have a download. You can call it your muse, you can call it God, the universe, whatever it is that inspires us. And I think it's the culmination of all of our experiences when we're trying to put them into a creative expression. You don't know when people say, if someone's an artist and they paint a painting, it's like, oh, well, what does that mean? What is that? Or you write a song, or you write like a piece of music that's on the violin. So there's not the words that you can say, oh, this is what you were trying to say. So what I discovered after it just sort of came. So the words, my name is Lambi, but I am a bunny. Isn't that strange? And isn't that funny? You'd think I'd be a lamb, but I have long ears. You'll see not everything is as it appears. So just right there, those, and I get goosebumps every time I sort of say that, because that just came in like a package to me, right? But if you think about it, that was the thing. My family didn't and wasn't functioning the way we appeared. If you looked at us externally, it looked like we had everything going on, right? We went to church every Sunday, Wednesday. Joe had a great job. We had 2 beautiful kids. We had a nice house. We had a bunch of friends, and everything looked great, but it was not great, Steve. I mean, it was the opposite of that. But interestingly too, which I wasn't doing this consciously, but my daughter is Samantha, Sammy, and we used to call her Sammy Lamb, Sam-a-Lammy, Sam-a-Lammy Ding Dong. So Lammy is her nickname. And when she was very little, her first lovey was a bunny. Mm. But I didn't sit down and say,
it just came together.
Let me write a character Lammy, but I'm going to make Lammy a bunny because Samantha is Sammy Lamb. And it's so, there's like a extra sweetness for me that it is my daughter who struggles right now with this disease. And she's obviously having a harder time with it as the person directly impacted, but as her mother, watching her suffer has been extremely painful. But she is my little Sammy Lammy. So I'm just grateful for wherever that came from. And then really, it's funny when you say the phrase, I mean, you and I know this phrase, you turn something on its ear, right? And that means you just uncover that it isn't what it appears. So, but here's Lammy with these big long ears, and the whole story is about, and I'm Lammy and I'm going to listen with my ears, and all of those little pieces just kind of, I wish I could say I'm just this brilliant genius person who pulled all that together, but that did just come. And I think it's impactful.
Yeah, it's a really great story. I read about when we introduced you that there's a correlation between the work that you've written about and the adverse childhood experiences, the ACEs. And I'm sure that people in our audience are familiar with ACEs, so we won't necessarily unpack what those are. But let's talk a little bit about how the book kind of does explore that, and especially because you're writing this not for the professional to understand ACEs. You're writing this to make a child feel like they're being heard and understood, and you're addressing these adverse experiences in their life and making them real in a way. So how does that tie together, and how did you get kind of that space to write about that?
Mm-hmm. So one of the things that I knew immediately, this was even when I had My Daddy Has a Problem, was to honor a child's feelings, to let them know their feelings are natural, and you can be upset and disappointed with a parent, but you still love that parent, which is a very complicated thing for kids because everything is so black and white. And the other thing was, kids are egocentric. I mean, I guess we're all egocentric, but they don't even try to not be egocentric. When kids are little, they think when they go to sleep, you go to sleep. When they wake up, you wake up. And the world just revolves around them. They don't understand this separateness. So they internalize if something bad is happening that they've caused it, because they just think they cause everything in their world to sort of happen. So it was very important for me to name and normalize feelings, emotions, words, and give language to that. It turns out there is a lot of research behind how important that is for our brains to be able to label something so that then it can move on to the next thing it needs to do. So when Lambi talks about, and I know people can't see, but if they get the book, there's a page where Lambi is sitting all alone, and the whole scene gives this feeling of what it feels like. You just feel like you're the only person going through that, and to feel disconnected from everyone and everything, and to feel alone in this shame is, something that I wanted to acknowledge that kids can be seeing and feeling. And so it says, but addiction is met with shame and with blame. Diseases are not always treated the same. This makes my heart hurt and I feel pain inside. I don't want to see friends. I just want to hide. I worry and wonder, did I cause this mess? It makes me feel sad and I feel lots of stress. So that's, really the first time. There's no other children's story where a young kid is going to see a heavy scene that they could relate to being depicted. And then, but once we acknowledge and say, yeah, this is going on, now the next part is, so now what are we going to do about this? You're not just going to leave a kid being like, yeah, this is really bad. It's sad and you're filled with stress. But then we start getting into these evidence-based, trauma-informed coping skills, like letting go, like Lambi lets go of that big balloon. And there's the anchoring piece where I also imagine I'm holding my heart. I hold it so close so it won't break apart. And then on the scene, you'll see there's the little Owen, the mouse is saying, you are brave. And then there's the meerkats. And this actually came from our good friend, Jerry Moe, who we both know. He recommended, when he gave it a first read, to also show a father, a dad being impacted, because this story focuses around a mom, which I can tell you why that happened. So acknowledging and seeing and hearing kids say, this was so meaningful to be seen for the first time. You can't be what you can't see, right? You can't even acknowledge for yourself that this is what you're experiencing. And there hasn't been a safe space to say, this is what's happening. This is what I'm seeing. This is how I'm feeling. So that's the acknowledgement of the ACEs. But then most importantly, we put in some positive experiences, because we understand that ACEs have to be addressed.
Right. I think it's interesting that you're really looking at this. I mean, you're as far upstream as you can get with prevention. I mean, this is really for itty bitty small children. I don't know if there's I liked reading it. So, I mean, again,
Right.
child in all of us, but you're really addressing, a very young person who's seeing this. But I think it also starts to open that dialogue. And I don't know if normalize is the right thing, but if we're not talking about it, you're not opening the door to it, because this isn't prevention and then it ends here. This just starts opening that dialogue. And I applaud you, because it opens the door, hopefully, to what's going to happen next, because this doesn't really get into prevention as I would teach prevention to a high school student or a young adult.
Right. No, right. For
but
sure.
At the same time, it's looking at the problem through the lens of, it's not just that, dad's not feeling well. There's something wrong here. So I don't know if normalize is the right word, but we're having that conversation. And I think that that's the first key to prevention further down the stream when they do get older. And you can say there's a correlation between what Lambi was illustrating and your challenge, whether you're going to use a substance or not, so that peer pressure and so forth. All of that begins here so that we can have more dialogue when they get to be 13, 15, 18.
Yeah. So, but to your point though, Steve, you're exactly right that to be introducing the subject, and then there's a whole bunch of pages that talk about some systematic practices to help regulate the nervous system. We know these kids, when they're triggered and exposed to ACEs, the long-term negative health effects come from this, not being able to regulate their nervous system, the brain being in overdrive. But the beautiful, beautiful piece of Lambi is that there is this whole part of, now as I grow up, I'll have choices to make, which road to go down and which path to take. As I think of the future and I look ahead, I think what my safe, trusted people have said. Be careful what choices you make when you choose. The choices decide if you win or you lose. And then the next page talks directly about this peer pressure, or when you start to see, so it says, now it might look like fun and it might seem real cool when you see some kids breaking rules at your school. Just take it from Lambi, it's not a good choice. Just stop and listen to your strong inner voice. That's not a good choice, says the voice in your head. That's not for me. I want good things instead. And then we go on to make other healthy choices. But if we can start having this conversation with kids 3, 4, 5, then what I'm working on right now is a full curriculum for kindergarten through 5th grade. I'm working with, you're talking to PhDs, I talk to PhDs and people who are in education to say, yes, this is an appropriate curriculum. Because as you know, I think it might even be this week, or maybe it's next week, is Red Ribbon Week across the country.
Yes.
Next week. And so people are hungry for prevention tools, and they need things that are for younger and younger students. So what we're going to do is get with these kids who are maybe in Head Start, pre-K, kindergarten, 1st grade, 2nd grade. Then we can go deeper with a message, 3rd, 4th, 5th, 6th grade. Now, these kids, in my experience, when I've gone to talk at schools, they've seen some things, but they still have yet to have it acknowledged. So they are even more grateful. I kept thinking, by the time a kid is 11, 12, 13, they're going to be a little crusty and they don't want to have a book in rhyme or whatever. But to your point, you said you enjoyed reading it. I've had grownups come up to me crying and saying, I needed this book when I was a kid. And you know what? That little kid is still in there. That little kid still resides in you. It's in me.
I need to read the part about self-regulation some days after, a hard day on Zoom,
I tell kids all the time, I say, listen, when you grow up, stress doesn't go away.
Right.
If you learn these tricks now to help you feel better, you will just know them longer and be able to use them quicker, because I need them. I have to take a deep breath before I have to come out and speak to regulate myself. So it's exciting to think that we're going to have these conversations younger, and people are acknowledging and becoming aware of how important it is to go younger and younger and younger. These kids are, you hear stories of a 4-year-old, a 5-year-old, a 6-year-old administering Narcan. And most of us and most of the people I imagine who were listening to your talks and listen to your podcast. I mean, I know for myself in my regular life, like I've never administered Narcan, and I have a daughter. I have it in my house and I know how to use it, but my friends have never seen somebody shooting up or taking drugs. I mean, they might have been more exposed to alcohol situations, but these kids have seen some stuff, and we think this is a national issue, right? And if we're going to address prevention, and you go out to the coalition, Steve, I mean, this is, you're talking to people and you hear the horrors. Someone shared at the conference that we were just at about, a family of 2 little girls that, terrible, horrible things are happening. And to feel like together, you and I, like we said, if one person is uplifted, if one person is impacted, if one person one little kid hears that story, feels the comfort, or they feel like Lammy sees them and understands them, and they feel that connection, that's why we do it.
Yeah, I think that's interesting. I've been asked this in conversations or done presentations, and people will say, well, how early do you think that we should start a prevention message with kids? And something like this is very appropriate. Again, this doesn't get into, specific substances and statistics and things like that. This is just that conversation. And I think that in the spectrum, the continuum of all of this, the conversation is the part that always needs to be brought to the forefront. Are we just talking about it? Because I can present on it, I can give you data and research,
right?
But to really have that conversation and when I see something like this, I think, that hopeful side of humanity says, hopefully this is where the family starts having this dialogue. Whether it's real or not in their lives, this is just something that we can talk about is a reality. Yeah. And what does that look like as my child or any child starts to get a little bit older? And that's why something like this fits into that spectrum of let's just have a conversation.
Right. And I say to kids when, generally what the school will do is they'll bring me all the little kindergartners. Then I get all the first grade, all the second grade. And, as I said, when I first started doing this, when they would bring me the fifth graders, I was always a little afraid of them. First of all, some of them are as tall as I am. And I'm thinking they're just going to be like, who is this lady? What is she talking to me about and reading this book? But what was such a surprise to me, Steve, was how hungry these kids were even to hear, to just be acknowledged, to be seen, to be able to have the conversation, to say, yeah. And by this age, they have seen some stuff. And they are also, I was shocked by how unvarnished. Kids are pretty unvarnished. And I'll tell you a funny story about that. I was in West Virginia a couple of weeks before this last time I was there. And in the back of the book, there's a picture. There's my picture, which is a headshot. So of course, the hair is done, makeup done, or whatever. The kids all had this book, and I'm walking around and I'm reading, and they get to that back page and they're like, is this you? Is this supposed to be you right here?
Yeah.
And I thought, what? I love the honesty.
Out of the mouth of babes.
Yeah. And I was like, well, it was a good hair day. And, it was a nice photographer who didn't, gave me a little bit of blurred lines, but
that's fantastic.
So, isn't that great? But in that same way, these same kids are willing to say, yeah, I have seen this. But what I tell them too, Steve, is this might not be happening in your family, but you could be a good friend to somebody because you will know someone whose life is impacted by this. And just all of us knowing a little bit more about it, we can help others just by understanding.
How can someone connect with you to learn more about this, learn more about you, or if they're interested in purchasing, because you made the reference if they wanted to get the book. So how does all that come together?
You can just email me, trish@lammylearns.com, or visit the website, which I think you're going to put in your notes.
Yes.
And, one of the things that I love about this work, Steve, and I know that you've experienced it in your exposure, is the collaboration and connecting with other people who we're all kind of trying to do the same thing, right? We're all in this like recovery journey. We're trying to look at how do we fit in? Where can we have some impact? And so I love to just hear from other organizations. How can I help? Where does this fit in? And I'm very excited now. I'm in the process, and we had talked earlier offline about facing challenges to get things out there, right? So this goes back to the 90s when I tried to get my first book published and nobody would even talk to me. So now I have a skill set, I had the ability, and also kind of the wherewithal that nobody was going to tell me no at this point, because I knew how needed this still was. And there was another inspiration that I'll share with you. As I was working on My Daddy Has a Problem, it was in Ohio. There was an officer who took a photograph of a little boy who was strapped in the back seat of a car. And he was with his grandmother and her boyfriend, and they had overdosed, and they were, I think they were able to revive both of them. But this photo is of this little 4-year-old sitting in the back of the car, strapped in the seatbelt. And I thought, well, he's already with his grandmother, so we know mom and dad are not on the scene, and grandma is suffering from this disease also. And I know that she did not wake up that day thinking, let's have our best day yet. Let's take the baby and go get some drugs. But I thought, here is this little boy, and what are these officers who are coming on the scene going to do with this kid, right? You know, they probably can't even give him the radio anymore. And I know that law enforcement does teddy bear drives and whatever, and that's a wonderful thing to have something to give to them. But to give a child something that then they're connected to, that acknowledges and validates them where they are. I was like, so that was the inspiration of why I needed and wanted the external character to come to life. There's also a Lambi mascot. People are mascot crazy. I did not know this. Did you know?
I saw Lambi at the conference, and I think that was the biggest hit. And Lambi came and went, and everybody was like, "Hey, you know,
where's Lambi?" So, you know, it's been a gratifying journey. It's a lot of work. And there's still, you know, the people who want to say no, or there's still people who, oh, you can't do that, or, oh, that's too hard, or, oh, you know, but there's enough people who recognize that this is something that we've got to do. And I'm not saying I'm the only thing to do it, but it's something to do. That's something that you can do it with. So the curriculum, there's a training, the training manual, and then I'm working with 2 universities, Marshall University and Vanderbilt University, to start doing data collection, working with CADCA. I have incredible partners in West Virginia who are supportive of, you know, let's really break down whatever barriers still exist. Some people say, oh, I love this, but I can't get it because it's not evidence-based. And you're like, well, it is, right? Because I didn't come up with grounding practices. I mean, I don't, you know, if I had 12 lifetimes, I could have been doing all these different things, but we know that works. So there's evidence-based, trauma-informed tools that are incorporated, being delivered through this story. So, but if you want to say it isn't, I mean, and so now the job is to let's break down these barriers. Wherever there's resistance, let's find some flow and get kids a message that can hopefully help and change their future.
You're listening to Prevention Perk. Lambi Learns About Addiction, a book about prevention, is an excellent resource to help kids understand about the disease of addiction and how it is not their fault. It offers a variety of coping skills, such as the ability to identify and express feelings in healthy ways. To learn more about the author or to get additional information and resources, please visit lambilearns.com. Well, I applaud your work, and I always have a question at the end as we start to wrap up. It's your opportunity to be the sage on the stage, there, Trish. So, what's something that you know maybe we didn't talk about, or you know, I'm a big fan of like what can the audience think, say, or do, you know, that will impact not only their lives but maybe others. So, what is it that you know you want to share with the audience?
Well, I thank you so much for having me here, and I just love talking with you. Let's do it again tomorrow, right? But I would say for me, it's about have the conversation, create that safe space to have the conversation with a child, with a grown-up, with whoever needs to be seen. And the big thing is helping a kid to trust themselves, like be true to your heart. And I hope that can help some kids.
My guest on this episode has been Trish Luna. You'll be able to find links to her work in our show notes. Thanks, Trish, for being here.
Steve, thanks so much for having me. It's been really a wonderful time to be with you.
And thank you for listening to Prevention Perk, a podcast from Mid-America PTTC. To learn more about our innovations, visit pttcnetwork.org and look under your PTTC for the Mid-America link. Remember, prevention is better together, and together we are stronger.